Welcome everyone to the Cineworks podcast. I am one of your hosts, Luis Alvarez, also known as Luigi, and with my co-host, Brian and Nguyen. And we have today's guest, Siku Allooloo. But before we begin the podcast, I would like to acknowledge that I stand here on the unceded, traditional, ancestral, and current homelands of the Coast Salish Peoples, which include the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And that I am very privileged to be able to live, work, play, and engage with film and filmmakers here in this land. And of course, the work we do at Cineworks strives to support, inspire, and encourage the independent filmmakers, especially those from underrepresented groups. So of course, we also strive to make this online space, but also our own physical space, safe, positive, and inclusive for everyone that is here. So welcome. And before we begin, I would like to introduce our guest. Siku Allooloo is an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and filmmaker from Denendeh, Northwestern Territories in Canada, by way of Haiti and Mitimatalik Nunavut. An artistic innovator, Siku often reimagines conventional forms as imbued by her cultural traditions, oral history, and land-based practice. Her artwork has exhibited nationally in several groundbreaking Indigenous art exhibitions, including Inua, the inaugural exhibition at xʷməthkվəy, Winnipeg Art Gallery. Her poetry and other writing have been published nationally and internationally. Among other places, The Guardian, Canadian Art Magazine, Truth Out, The Capilano Review, and Chapelé. Her first short film, Spirit Emulsion, from 2022, won Best Canadian Short Film at Gimli International Film Festival, Le Prix de la Rebelle, Le Emerging Talent Award at Festival International Presence Autochtone, 2 Filmmaker Awards at Yellowknife International Film Festival, and Honorable Mention, Doxa Documentary Short Award. In recent years, Siku was a programmer for Black Star Film Festival and Available Light Film Festival. Siku is currently leading the development of her first feature-length documentary project, Indígena, as the writer, director, and co-producer with Jessica Hallenbeck from Lantern Films. She is also a co-curator of the Woven In Indigenous Women's Activism and Media exhibition at the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria, which is on display until May 7, 2023. So first of all, apologies if I mispronounced anything. That's one. Second, welcome, Siku. We are happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
So I read a little bit about your work, about the work you've done before, these different disciplines and how you integrate them into different mediums. And I know film has been, correct me if I'm wrong, the most recent discipline that you started to get your hands into, starting with Spirit Emulsion. And I'm very curious, if I may, how did the jump came from your previous practice that you decided, now I want to do film, now I want to integrate these different aspects of my art practice into film?
I've had a secret interest in pursuing film for about 10 or 12 years. And I had a couple of false starts early on, and I just wasn't really quite ready to make that jump at the time. And it was actually through venturing into visual art and just moving the writing was always the base, and there's a lot of like visual description and elements in the writing, and the writing itself is it kind of crosses different forms and genres. And yeah, I think just like I took my time and venturing into finding my way as a visual artist and an interdisciplinary artist gave me so much insight into how I would actually like to formulate my work into film. So Cineworks actually was a really big part of that. It was through the xວməthkվəy exhibition that Cineworks was a partner on with Marianne Nicholson, Althea Thauberger, and the Belkin Gallery at UBC. That was my first art gallery exhibition that I got to be part of. And through that, there were some workshops that were led by Cineworks, and that gave me the spark. And eventually we got to talking about artist residencies and this dream project that I have, and Cineworks was just incredibly supportive.
I'm always thinking how important it is. The artist at the end of the day is a creator, of course, but in today's world, you always feel that we don't get enough support. We don't get enough outside support from institutions, especially, to actually encourage our art, give us like a solid platform where we are allowed to practice our art without necessarily having just to worry over our shoulder if we're going to make for ends meet. So places like Cineworks and other institutions that somehow we do what we can. We acknowledge that sometimes resources can be a bit limited, but even then, just being able to provide some of those resources, or even just providing a mentor, a mentor figure that we can point to and say, hey, this person can probably also help you out on your path. I think that's already very encouraging, because it makes it feel less lonesome, that you actually are probably on the right track with people who are also with the same wavelength, that actually think more or less the same, that they want to engage in art the way you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also great to be able to do it through an organization like Cineworks that is just fully supportive. And like, I never really wanted to go to film school. I did get accepted into a film program in 2012, and I decided not to go. I was always kind of very interested in doing things like in my own way, and especially like through mentorship and cultural context and hands-on practice, versus being heavily influenced by like a conventional regime. So yeah, that was the amazing thing, that Cineworks put together a program that was just based on mentorship and allowing me to have input into who I wanted to learn from and the kinds of things that I wanted to learn. And it was very collaborative, the construction of the residency itself, and that was perfect for me.
Any comments, Brian?
Yeah, I'm just reading the description that you have for Spirit Emulsion here, and it says it was filmed on Super 8. I'm just curious how you made that choice to use that particular medium, and how did you find what was it like when you were trying to use it? Were there any challenges that you faced?
It was an incredibly beautiful process. I was paired with Lisa Marr at Echo Park Film Center North here in Vancouver. And Lisa is like an incredible mentor and just a community-based artist. And she has this amazing array of programming and stuff that she does to really democratize hand process filmmaking. And so I spent a bit of the summer with her, and she taught me about Super 8. I was keen to use Super 8 and to learn about eco-processing because I come from a background of land-based practice and working with like plants and things harvested from the land, and integrating that and using things to the fullest extent, and including prayer and ceremony and all of that into the process of different kinds of things including artwork. And so when Lisa was teaching me about eco-processing, it was just a really natural jump for me. And I thought, wow, this is exactly the perfect starting point for me to develop a practice as a filmmaker and to approach filmmaking itself as a beginner. The other thing that really appealed to me, excuse me, is she explained to me that Super 8 was the first home video recording device. And I thought that that was just so incredible because I also really like, I don't really ascribe to a hierarchy and, you know, like really privileged forms of technology and art making that's not very accessible to community members or people on the ground. So I just think that it goes hand in hand with showing more grounded stories. And I really liked that background history of it, that there's accessibility and people documenting their own lives. There's the other part we can get into, but I'm working on a project that's about a history of media making by Indigenous women in particular, documenting our own struggles. And these are things that were always overlooked by mainstream media. So part of my interest is looking at these marginalized histories and things that people had to document themselves. So all of that really fit together with the medium and just the process of working with eco-processing and Super 8. It was just very lovely.
Yeah, Super 8 is it's a medium that I've never used myself, but I've always been interested in trying to learn how to use it, incorporate it in my any projects that I do. Yeah, I've never done it myself, but I was really curious when I heard that you had worked in it before.
It's magic.
In general, if I may, working with actual analog film with celluloid, I think overall it's magic because you are so involved with the process from beginning to end. I haven't had the opportunity to shoot in 8mm, but I've had the opportunity to shoot in 16mm using the Bolex camera, which is, for better and worse, a little bit more complicated than most Super 8 cameras, where, as you say, because they were technically among the first standardized home video, it was like point and shoot and focus well enough. With the Bolex, I remember we had to learn how to do light reading with a Sekonic analog light meter just to get proper exposure, make sure you got the right stock of film, make sure you loaded up the roll properly. So next and next, but nonetheless, it was very satisfying work because there's a physicality to it. And again, not to knock on digital, digital has its merits and in many ways has democratized the accessibility that people can have in doing their own projects. Again, I keep saying it, everyone has a camera already. And honestly, with the technology nowadays, you can make some really incredible projects with just your cell phone and a bit of creativity. But there is something great about using the old ways, especially because one thing that I always appreciate about film is the physicality. And I'm curious, was the physicality part of the appeal that you had for using 8mm?
Yeah, of course. That was the main thing. There was like my mental kind of interest got really stimulated when Lisa was telling me about the history. But then when it came to the process of working with my hands and the film and picking the materials to make the developer, all of that process, like I just absolutely fell in love and could have just stayed in that world for like decades, probably.
Not a bad place to be. And I would add to that, it's so involved. And because it is an unforgiving medium, at the end of the day, it's not just point and shoot like that. It is an unforgiving medium. It makes it precious. I think it raises a self-awareness when you use analog film that with digital, it's understandably probably easier to just take for granted. Make the shot count.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's just it is an important reminder. And coming back to land-based practice or just cultural practice in Indigenous homelands, it's just like we're always reminded about being appreciative and not taking anything for granted, and being very intentional, even about the way that you walk through space, or that you enter like an environment, or all of that is really important. And in the world we live in urbanized spaces, we don't really that's not a factor. So I like those kinds of reminders that make you aware of your own being and your approach, and you have to be intentional, and it demands respect and patience. Yeah, I think that there's so much value in that.
Yes, it is. It actually makes you slow down and consider what you're doing, as you say. And I think that's very important, especially for the type of work you do, because it is intentional and there are many ideas that really take time to simmer, take time to take shape, because correct me if I'm wrong, but part of your work has been exploring your own history, for example. So even that, just doing the research, just finding out the threads behind you and how you weave them into this tapestry to actually make a coherent vision. And more importantly, one thing, what little I've seen of your work, and I have read a bit about your project Indígena, which I may want to talk to a little bit further, is how the past that you reflect in your work is also a reflection of the future, of the potential future. And that I appreciate, because it is a future where Indigenous voices rise, where Indigenous voices rise, are given an actual proper place that they have always deserved at the table, and that they can create their own future. Through this art, the way I see it, of course, if I may, we are weaving our own future forward.
Thank you, Luis. It's really important to me to try and do my part to bring those voices from the past forward, because they were so overlooked. It means that generations today and in the future don't have those inheritances that they should rightfully have. Like, we should always have those kinds of voices with us. We should always have that history to build on, and it's been so suppressed and erased that what I'm trying to do is just give it visibility, give it presence, so that people today and in the future can be nourished by it in the ways that we need to as Indigenous peoples.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's always a shame when people, it's important to look forward, to look for the future, yes, but without leaving everything behind, without leaving your history. I mean, if I may, I myself, I come from Mexico, so already, like in many countries, that already creates a very complex dynamic of our own history because of colonization and fragmentation. Like some parts are really complete, others are quite fragmented. So how do you recreate an identity that has been lost, that has been shattered? And I think art has definitely been one of the more powerful mediums in which a lot of people have actually, again, slowly pieced as best as they could, sometimes masterfully, their identity, but not just whom they were, whom they are, and again, who they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to synthesize from your art, what is what is the truth? What is the message that you are always wanting to communicate to others? If there was one thing that people who look at your art, who look at your poetry, at your writing, even at your films, what is it that you personally wish? You, of course, they're always going to take something for themselves, regardless of what the artist wants. But nonetheless, you, the artist, what do you want to tell them? I'm curious.
That is a beautiful question. I've never even thought about that or been asked that before. I think part of where everything comes from for me is like a spiritual connection. A lot, like essentially most of what I do, it connects in one way or another to my mother, who passed when I had just turned 14 years old. And so in dealing with that and grieving, I developed like just a spiritual connection, like my own kind of relationship to her, to communicate to her, and feel like I still had that motherly relationship, which I don't think I was making up. I think that actually really fits into my belief system and the understanding that the spirit world is co-present with our world. And if it is co-present, that means that we can continue to have these intimate relationships. And that's really what like indigenous cultural relationships are all about. Like when we give offerings and pay our respect and communicate with even non-human beings, is honoring that there's spiritual resonance and relationships there. So I just integrate that. That's where all of the writing is stemming from, and the interdisciplinary work and the film work. It's stemming from that understanding that like it's communicating in a spiritual way, an emotional way, and that it's taking, I don't want to say taking for granted, it's just like accepting as a reality that the spirit world is co-present. And I'm trying to communicate with my intentions and my ancestors and the helping spirits and my mother to try and help bring her legacy forward, and just do my best as the relative that I am in our ancestral line. So I don't think that I accomplish anything by myself. I think that it is entirely based in these kinds of relational, just relational beings and realities. I just think like I just try my best to represent that. And so I guess the intention I have for the people that are engaging with the things that I put forward is just that can be a reminder, or maybe like an opening for viewers or readers to have that reaffirmed for themselves, because I think that's one of the most important things that gets lost in the globalized world and the colonial world, is that like people don't remember that they have a spirit and that they can have a spiritual relationship with the world and move in that way. So it's just trying to like bring awareness back into, that create an atmosphere where people can get a bit of a sense of that as a real thing.
Well said, Siku. And I guess one way I think about it is the past breeds in the present. Right?
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I've read that your main project when you were artist in residence at Cineworks was this documentary called Indigena. Is that something that you're still working on at the moment?
Yes. Indígena from the Spanish.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, so that's the main project that I'm working on. It's years and years in the making. And when I was in the residency at Cineworks, I realized that before I can actually properly take that on, I need to develop some skills, and I have a lot to learn in becoming a filmmaker. So that's why in the process of that, I decided to make a short film working with Super 8, and that became Spirit Emulsion. That was really like my way of making like an offering, and I call it a cinematic opening prayer to the larger project. And so yeah, the Indígena project is looking at the Red Power movement, or the American Indian movement specifically, through the lens of this amazing, groundbreaking Indigenous newspaper that was founded by my mom in Berkeley, California in the 1970s.
Right on.
And through her lens, it captures all of this formative Indigenous history throughout North, Central, and South America, and beyond, actually. It had the most extensive and up-to-date coverage of Indigenous movements in the world, and it had a global circulation, and it was run by these Indigenous women. And most people don't know about this. There was like, if you look into the Red Power movement, and especially the American Indian movement, you're going to see the names of all these male leaders who were at the forefront. And you're not really going to see very much, you're not going to hear the voices, you're not going to see the messages or the leadership of a lot of the people behind the scenes, and especially the women. So Indígena was the name of my mom's newspaper. It was called Indígena News from Indian America. And I am resurrecting the history and that legacy through my mom's life story, and also the network of other incredible women and marginalized Indigenous peoples throughout the hemisphere that she was working alongside.
Is there any way we can access these newspapers?
I'm in the process of trying to make them accessible now. They're 50 years old, and so I'm years in the process of trying to accumulate as many original copies as I can that have just survived in people's personal collections. Now that travel is getting a lot more like we can travel again. I was delayed by a few years with this pandemic, so I'm planning to make some trips to go visit different library holdings and see what has survived of any of these papers, because again, yeah, they're 50 years old, and newspapers were not made to last. They were made at the time to just like be accessible, be printed, get out there. And I don't think people were really thinking so much far in the future. There was just, at the time, there was so much happening in the Indigenous world that had never occurred before. Like, what I'm saying is, that was the first time Indigenous people from all different parts of the world were starting to see their struggles for self-determination, for protection of their homelands, and against genocide that was ongoing. They were starting to see their struggles in each of their contexts in relationship to other Indigenous peoples. And because mainstream media in any of these countries, mainstream media was not covering any of these happenings in the Indigenous world. So my mom's newspaper brought light to all of that, and it just lit up like a whole network of people. And it's formative history. And so, yeah, at the time they were just embedded in the movement. you know, and so probably like up, I know this about my mom, like up all hours of the day and the night, and like constantly hustling to try and get as much donations in order to make each issue happen. And, you know, they were just really embedded in the work itself. And there was like, the context was police brutality and censorship and like violence and ignorance and racism. There was so much to contend with. So I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to find original copies of every issue, but that's still yet to be determined. And part of the project, in addition to the film, I'm actually trying to get a handle on all of the issues so that I can republish them so that they can be accessible. Very long-winded answer, sorry.
It's a really good answer, Riley. Yeah.
I think I remember reading about the project before, seeing what it was about. And I think it's an amazing project because, again, you are bringing the resurgence of your mother's legacy, which is an important work, not just to you, but even to the greater community, the greater Indigenous community, because yes, sadly, historically, and even to present times, these stories have always been put to the side, shelved, forgotten, destroyed even. There are still stories that are not being let out to be spoken. And I think that this work is wonderful because, again, it connects to the past, not just your personal past, of course, but the past of all of these people, this vast network of people, of Indigenous women who were getting their voices out and trying to help others get their voice out. So even just a great tapestry of what Indigenous people, how they see, how they feel, what is their place in the world. And this work, I commend you for the ambition and for the jump, because from a short film to a feature film, it is already, I'm not gonna lie, it's a huge leap, and I tip my invisible hat to you because I'm not wearing any. But I do believe at the heart of your story, because it is a very personal story to you, of course. But even through its personal roots, it does grow into something far greater and bigger than you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important because I believe that the work should speak for itself. And I do believe the work has, once the work is out there, it is no longer just your work. It stops being your film alone. It is the world's. And the world itself also shapes it. But you at least want to give them a nudge into what direction. See us, understand us, and let's keep walking. Let's keep walking together.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the ambition of the project. And I love that, I remember that this project actually was one of our nominees for Talent to Watch last year. And of course, due to some, structural disagreements, unfortunately, we could not hold it there. But it is a project that personally I will continue to root for, and I am sure that we as Cineworks, we can find a way, one way or another, even humbly, to help out, because I think it is a good project.
Thank you, Luis. It is ambitious, but I kind of I don't know if how this is gonna come out.
Like most films.
I mean, I don't know how this what I'm about to say is gonna come across, but like I just really have always had this like very firm kind of like I'm trying to think of a not funny way to say this, but I just have always really centered my own culture and Indigenous cultures, and like so much of the world around us, like the country of Canada superimposed upon Indigenous homelands throughout this country. You know, that's a superimposition, and it centers itself all the time and tries to like brainwash Indigenous peoples into thinking that we should be very thankful for like anything that comes our way and for any ability to participate in the Canadian context or the mainstream, and we're given like little bits here and there of marginalized platforms. And I just like, I so do not buy into that. And so I know that making a film is a lot of work, and it is a big jump to go from a short film to a feature film. But like the reality is, if I don't do this, and if we as Indigenous peoples don't do this to tell our own stories, to like correct the dominant narratives and the erasure of our history, if we don't do this ourselves, it's not happening. And I think that this story, this legacy, it doesn't just belong to me. That was the other thing, is like I've always been interested in my mom's life story since I was a little girl. And I actually like spent my life asking her about her life and her past. And I was always just like completely intrigued by her and the things that she was part of. And so, yeah, I've continued to learn about her since she passed when I was 14. And I thought she was the most special and incredible woman. But then realizing like, actually, what she was part of was like a vast network of people and a heavy history, so important, groundbreaking, life affirming, world making. She was part of this thing that like, that belongs to everyone. That belongs to all Indigenous peoples. That's our movement. That's our history. And so I'm grateful that I've been able to maintain a piece of her, of what I remember, and being able to follow that and be supported by the other loved ones in her life that were collaborating with her, working alongside her, inspired by her. There's so much there. And so yeah, it's a very collaborative project. I'm working with many people, and that's the only way to do it. And because this is the personal thread of it, through like my connection with my mom and even her story, that's going to be the through line. But that through line is going to bring a whole collective history, and that belongs to the people, you know.
Of course, one thread at the end of the day connects to 100 more threads, and so on. Again, I'm going to keep going back to this analogy of the tapestry, but each individual story is part of the greater whole, especially if your story affects others in a positive way that actually helps other stories grow. So her work was important. The work other people that collaborated with her was also important. And the work that you're doing now, bringing all that to the forefront. And I think that's a key word. Bringing all of this to the forefront is important because, as you said, if we do not tell these stories, nobody else will.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys really touched on a lot of anything I wanted to ask about it. But I guess part of the process of going forward with this project, you also had to form your own production company.
I did that because I wanted to maintain the rights. I could have given the rights to much larger producers, but that just never felt right to me, because narrative sovereignty is so important. And I know that like the way that there's so many aspects to the story and to the context of the time, and it belongs to so many people, and there was so much complexity to it that it's really important to me that this gets told in a truthful and yet a caring and an accountable way that reflects well on everybody whose legacy is going to be coming forward through this film. But not only that, like I want it to be in dialogue with other histories from that time that maybe are going to be reckoned with, but I want it to be in a constructive way. And also creatively, it's important to me that this is told in a way that's very much in line with my mom was Indigenous from the Caribbean, Taino. So it's important to me that the storytelling framework itself is culturally grounded and in that tradition of our ancestors. So all of those things, they're going to come up against mainstream producers and mainstream frameworks. And so the narrative sovereignty is like, that's a no, what's the word? It's a complete deal breaker for me to ever give up the rights. And I know that my mom wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, I feel like I had to, I realized pretty quickly that I would have to start my own production company, because I was looking at all of these different funders and everything that's going to Indigenous projects have to be going to Indigenous producers and production companies. So yeah, big learning curve, big learning curve.
Well, you know what they say, and I think this does apply to a lot of work where we actually want to have control, not because we want control, but because we want to have the work be integral. To exist is to resist, and at the end, this is resistance, the type of resistance that is needed against, not so much against the mainstream per se, but against how we are portrayed, how we portray ourselves. Let us tell our stories, let us tell them how we need to tell them, grounded on our cultural identities and our backgrounds. Let us actually shape them how we know we can shape them, that will do justice, instead of just trying to haphazardly fit into the model du jour, so to speak.
You're so right. Yeah, existence is resistance, and I think that that's also true in the film industry. And like what I've learned, what I've experienced, just having like in the last couple of years started this production company, and like I'm also really aware of documentary, the history of the form of documentary filmmaking, because on my other side, on my dad's side, we're Inuit, and Flaherty's first documentary film, the first documentary film ever made was a stereotype of Inuit, and it was made specifically as part of the project of colonization to show that like the myth of the vanishing Indian, which actually started in my mom's territory. So all this is like super layered. Yeah, Columbus landed in my mom's ancestral homeland of Haiti, on the Haiti side of the island. So the myth of the vanishing Indian started there, and our Taino ancestors, my mom's people, were written into history as extinct, even though there was like hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of them still around and all over the Caribbean. And the Spanish were like, oh no, we'll just say on paper that you're not here so that we can annex your homelands and start to build our own empires. That's what they did. yeah, yeah, it's maddening, but it's also, it's like, it's insanely fascinating to me. And I just think it's kind of funny that my parents got together and made me, because on the other end of that, there's Inuit, the Inuit, how we were framed and dispossessed through the documentary film format itself. And so I just like, I feel really like, I guess, entitled to be remaking these in my own way. Well, yeah, I just like, I love being able to possess these different forms and reclaim them, and actually just like turn them back onto themselves, to represent my cultural histories and to tell these stories. Yeah.
As you should. The powers that be, often of colonization, have told their story, their version of things for quite a while. I think it is only fair that we start telling our version of the story, and it may be a little bit different. It's definitely going to be another perspective, an important perspective, because it's not just one side, it's many sides, and the oppressed also have their story to tell. And so there is still a lot of systemic racism, a lot of systemic oppression, marginalization, and whatnot. It's not as before. We do have access to better tools and communities which slowly have begun to amplify our voices. And I think that's important, especially because I believe a lot of these projects come from a point of, this is our story and I want you to understand. So we, in a way, it is reaching out first and foremost to other Indigenous peoples, of course, like, hey, we're here, we're together, but also to the wider community, like, look at us, really look at us and understand us, and know that we have to be on the level. For it to be fair, for there to be truth and reconciliation, we have to be on the level.
It's just that documentary and film, the film industry has been used and continues to be used in ways that dispossess Indigenous people of our sovereignty, including narrative sovereignty. So that's something that is like still very much in play in so many different levels of the industry. So it's so exciting to be learning all of this as a producer, and to be like, oh wow, okay, I can clearly see all of the colonial context at play here, and like we're just gonna be like attending to all of this in the process of making this film. So yeah.
Of course.
A long time coming.
It's been a long time coming, but you're right. A lot of these mechanisms are still in effect, how you are presented. And sadly, it's not just even Indigenous peoples. It's different groups. Anyone who is just generally not, would be a marginalized group, or just we would be a historically persecuted group or whatnot. Even when they try to do more positive portrayals on mainstream media, more often than not, there's still a lot of misconceptions that remain. There's still a lot of wrong information that for some reason, yeah, this is the good stuff, so we're going to put it out there, instead of letting the people from the communities actually tell their stories, like offer the resources, offer the support, the mentorship, teach them how they can tell their stories.
Give us the means.
Do you have any time frames for when this you think this project is going to be complete, or is it still very much a work in progress?
I'm going to be entering into the last phase of development. I've spent the last 2 years in development, as I've been kind of, finding my way through the creative learning curve and the producing learning curve. And so, yeah, going to be entering into the last phase of development. And I think we'll be starting production probably in the fall at the earliest, or in the new year, depending on how things go. And thank you. And yeah, we'll see. It's my first feature film, so I'm anticipating it'll probably be 2 years more in the making. We'll see. There's going to be a lot to it, and yeah, it's going to be a full-on engagement for as I can.
I feel like the first project is always the toughest one. It's where you tend to make the most mistakes, I think.
Yeah.
I think that what you learned with Spirit Emulsion, I think there's been a lot of learnings that you're going to bring into Indígena. And yet, there are new things you are going to learn along the way with Indígena, because yes, a feature is not a short and vice versa. But nonetheless, you already proved that you can do film. You're just going to make it bigger, make it more ambitious. I believe it can be done.
It's getting done.
It has to be done.
It's happening.
It has to be done. It's happening. And to the point where you may know what I'm going to say, but if not, at some point, we would love to screen it at Cineworks.
Of course.
Because it is important work that has to be forefronted. And besides any help that we are able to do, so we are small, I'm sure there's something we can do. We're always rooting for you. This is a project that we wanted to succeed. We wanted to go forward, and we wanted to inspire other Indigenous peoples to actually bring forth their stories, that they are further encouraged to keep bringing forward their own stories as well.
Yes, thank you, Louise, and thank you, Cineworks. Like Cineworks is really where the spark for me got lit up. It got relit. There was a cinematography workshop as part of the, it was originally called the Mirrored in Stone project that was led by Marianne Nicholson and Althea Thalberger. It was, I think, in 2016, probably. There was 2 years of this project that led to the To Be Here Always exhibition at the Belkin. So at the cinematography workshop, I was so inspired and so lit up. I couldn't sleep. And I remember saying, Marianne, it's just like my favorite song. David Bowie, Sound and Vision, like cinematography, filmmaking. It's exactly sound and vision. And she's like, you're crazy. Like, you need to go to sleep. Like, you need to come, right? And I was just like so amazed and inspired. And yes, I'm so grateful for Cineworks for creating this opportunity for me to just really run with all of this and move forward. And yeah, with a great community of people. Vancouver has such a rich community of independent filmmakers. So yeah, I love being a part of this world at this time.
Well, even though I didn't have the opportunity to be around except for the very tail end of your residency, I am glad that you found the support in Cineworks and that the spark was realigned. So right now you're pushing forward and you will make Indígena, and I will gladly see it.
Thank you, Louise. Well, I'm so grateful to get to have this conversation with both of you, and thank you for your insight and your support.
Thank you, Siku, for joining us today. I know we've been. I don't know if the conversation's been happening with you, Siku, but certainly behind the scenes, we've been talking about doing this for quite a long time. So it's nice. It's nice to finally, get around to it.
Yeah. Well, everything's in its right time, and there's been a lot going on. So I think this was perfect timing for me too.
No, we're very grateful for having you here. And of course, for those listening, if you are interested in learning more about Siku, about her work, about what she's done, what she's currently doing, and of course, future projects, you can visit Siku's website, which is Siku, Siku, Allooloo, ALLOOLOO.com. All one word. That's her website. And you can also follow her on Instagram. And her Instagram username is, I love the name, Disco Boo. Disco, BOU, again, all one word, all together. So yes. And if you would like to hear more Cineworks podcast, please don't forget to follow us as well on social media. You can usually find us at Cineworks or Cineworks Band, whether on Instagram, whether Facebook, on Twitter as well. And we also have our webpage, which is cineworks.ca. So until next time, thank you everyone here. Thank you, Siku. Thank you, Brian. And thank you everyone who listens to the podcast. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.